funny thing happened to Omar on his way to freedom.
Hey, you one of the refugees?
Yes.
Fate took a detour.
What's your name, pal?
Omar.
Right, Omar. Don't blow up shite or, rape anyone, right?
Okay.
Do you want to lift back up to town, pal?
Now he's stuck in limbo.
What would you do if they let you stay?
I would like to wear suit and work in office.
I was taking a chance to make life better.
I want to play for Chelsea Football Club.
One wrong step and they would deport us.
You ever think about who you were before all of this?
I cannot be myself back home.
In Syria, very famous.
Maybe a little.
Maybe I could be your agent.
Like Tom Cruise with Jerry Maguire.
Welcome to the Night Before podcast, movie podcast, where my husband and I talk about the movie we watched the night before. But in tonight's case...
You jumped right to the spoiler.
What?
You jumped right to the spoiler.
Yeah.
Oh, but you also say we go
to a
local spot, brewery or coffee shop.
Or coffee shop.
And
we
share
talk about
over
thoughts. Let's just do the intro together tonight.
No, this is good.
All right, ready? Let's say it together.
No, we've already done it. It's already rolling.
Jimmy, do it again.
No, but what's the plot twist?
Plot twist. It's not the next day. We watched the movie today. This is a special Mother's Day episode because I thought it would be fun to record an episode on Mother's Day, and we went to a movie as one of our Mother's Day activities.
So this is the night of podcast.
So this is the night of podcast tonight. So here we are at
So we saw the movie Limbo today
in the Tampa Theatre.
Tampa
which
Theatre.
was awesome.
We posted a few pictures on our Instagram at Night Before Podcast. Is our name. But two things. Yes, we thought about kind of just acting like it was the next day. But Mother's Day is on a Sunday. And we also looked at the logistics of the thing. We wanted to talk about this movie, which we haven't talked about it since seeing it a couple hours ago. But we also knew the reality on Monday night, either Monday morning, we're going off to work. We'd have to get up super early for coffee to go talk about it, which I think would be kind of neat for
It's a possibility, but not
episode.
tomorrow. It's not a possibility for tomorrow.
Not for tomorrow. And we knew maybe Monday night after work it could happen, but we didn't want to let it slip away because even though we might be a little loose with this rule of doing it the night of instead of the night before the next day, no way would we do it like 2 days later or 3 days later.
No, definitely not. And I feel like because it's Mother's Day, we can make an exception.
Yeah. So to get an end of the evening nightcap to wind down the weekend and to talk about the movie, our thoughts. We are at a location in Tampa, Florida called Circa 1949.
Beer garden.
It's like a beer garden. They're not a brewery.
It's not a brewery.
It's not a bar.
It has a beautiful patio, and it's a place we like to come a lot, really, after work sometimes on Fridays. But it's a really nice night out, so we thought we'd sit outside here, and plus they're open kind of late for a Sunday, so
yeah, it's hard to find places Sunday nights. It isn't just like a dive bar somewhere that's going to be open all night. So it's nice. There's a fountain. Fountain as a centerpiece to this little beer garden area, so you might hear the fountain running in the background. A couple folks talking in the background. So that's where we're at, and I think I got myself a Space Grass IPA.
From Anchorage, local Tampa.
Local Tampa brewery.
I got myself, I can't remember the brewery, and I don't have the menu in front of me, but it's an IPA. It's called By My Side. And it is really good. It's very different tasting. I'll
double dry hop, they say.
I'll fact check the brewery it's from.
Double dry hop.
Yeah.
Yes,
double dry hop.
We thought before kind of winding down for the night, we would grab a drink, talk about this Limbo movie we just saw, and and go from there. And so yeah, so we are breaking the rule. It is the night of, not from the night before, but I think it's fine.
And another special thing about our movie today was that I mentioned it before. We went to the Tampa Theatre, one of the oldest theaters, well, the oldest theater in Tampa. It's a lot of fun to go to because it's right downtown. It's local. It's really ornate inside of it. And I loved that because of COVID, it was closed for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely are people that, when possible, we really like to throw our money at local
Yeah, I really like
establishments,
Tampa
local
Theater.
theaters, whatnot. But a unique thing about it is when we get there, love this, they always have a guy playing the organ on stage.
Yeah.
Is that just the organ or is it something else?
No, it's just like a big
Yeah,
fancy
it's just
organ.
a big organ, and that's kind of the pre-show entertainment rather than doing previews and whatnot. He just sits up on the stage and plays the organ, and it's really unique and fun.
And that's fun. And then when he's done, he sinks down into the stage.
When he's done, he just sinks, disappears into the stage. And we happen to have, because it's Mother's Day, my 2 teenagers with me, us, and
Giving them
so
a
we
little
always
culture.
like to kind of
The
expose
gift of
them
culture and exposure.
to what's unique about Tampa
Yeah.
as well.
Unique.
So
Yeah, everything's not an AMC movie theater or
That's right.
or a movie with people with capes flying around saving the universe.
right.
But no, I will say this. I have a love-hate relationship with Tampa Theater. Maybe not love-hate's the right word. A love / like disappointment with Tampa Theater. I want it to be so much more. It's a cool spot. And maybe it's partly me. Like, every time I go there, I'm like, man, I got to see more movies at Tampa Theater. And we see a lot over time, but we don't see a ton of films there. I mean, I'm talking
the films that they
pre-COVID.
play now are better. Remember for a while there, they just weren't playing anything.
That's what I mean. It's like, I'm always thinking,
It is better now.
Is it me or is it you? Is like my relationship with Tampa Theater. Like, am I not giving some of the films they're picking a chance? Are
I
they
think
not
we
picking?
haven't checked as much because lately, when I was looking for Mother's Day or just in general something to do, I see a lot of good films that they're putting out right now. But for a while there, when we would look, we were kind of like, who is in charge of
Yeah, who's curating this stuff? Who's
curating the
picking it?
films? Because it was just not a great selection. But now I really think they've stepped it up. But we've had a lot of good experience. We've seen authors. Remember when we went and saw that author?
George Saunders, yeah.
George Saunders there. That was a really cool experience. And
And we've seen some cool movies there, but I don't think we've been there since Isle of the Dog for a film. Isle of the Dogs, the Wes Anderson film.
we have not seen a film there since then. Yes, you're right.
And granted, COVID's happened. I'm going to say this last thing about Tampa Theater. I kind of like Tampa Theater post-COVID because it is a very nice, ornate, old theater. But part of the problem is there when you get there, you kind of have to like sort of maneuver where you want to sit.
Well, because it's old, all the seats are kind of really close together.
They're close together, and often over the years, someone sits down in front of you, even if they're like 2 rows in front of you, they're
Kinda have
just
to
the way
look-
the theater's set up. You have a person, unfortunately, right behind you, right in front of you. You can't even see, and you either have to decide, do I move? But then you don't want to create that problem for other people.
Right.
So you're looking behind you, and you're like, ugh, if I move here, it's going to mess up that. I'm doing the same problem. So now because of social distancing, they have like certain rows marked off,
COVID has solved that problem.
and it's like
at Tampa Theater.
ideal viewing experience. So my one complaint with Tampa Theater was the stress of finding a good seat and not having someone block you. Now that's gone because every seat is perfect while they have certain things sectioned off.
And I do like the order from an app on your phone,
And they do this
and then go
cool-
get your snacks because
Yeah, your concessions.
it definitely never was that. And because it's an old theater, they have like 2 people working a concession stand, and if you were there in a busy,
Yeah.
crowded thing, you kind of had to plan that, like to stand in line for a little while.
Yeah, so this is
So
like
that
also
solved that
somewhat
problem.
movie theater review episode.
Right. I mean, we love Tampa Theater.
But we like going to the old theaters when we can. So it was a good, I think, first off, good theater experience, even amongst like COVID standards. Like they did a temperature check at the door. You wear your mask most of the time in the building,
Right.
but still really pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good. And there wasn't a lot of people there,
Not at all. No.
but that's might be typical for a movie like
Or on
Limbo.
Mother's Day. Maybe that's not something a lot of people do on Mother's Day. I don't know.
Well, I don't think Limbo is,
Limbo
cranking the
isn't
tickets.
the top pick. I really wanted to see something fun and quirky. When we watched the trailer of Limbo, it presented itself.
Yeah, which if you haven't seen this movie, we'll say for the listeners, watch the trailer. We're not going to really. I don't think there's a ton that you can really spoil in this movie.
No.
But we're not going to go through all the spoilers. We're going to talk about it a
Right.
bit. But if you watch the trailer, even if you haven't seen it, I think you're safe to listen.
Well, I thought it would be a good
But the trailer
movie
does present one thing.
for my 2 teenage boys to watch with us because for various reasons. I don't know if I was 100% right on that.
No, I think you are. I think you got to let them sit with it.
I do. They have to let them sit with it. However, I
Because
thought
instant
it was going
teenage
to
reaction
be.
is hated it.
They didn't love it because it was. Well, we'll talk about what reasons, but I did expect it to be slightly more funny and quirky than it actually was based on the trailer.
But I'm going to say something to you.
What?
I'm glad it wasn't what the trailer presented. Because that is one of my problems I have with this movie tonally. The first half versus the second half of this film.
Mm-hmm.
The first half is a misrepresented version of the film too, like the trailer is, but in a whole nother direction.
It goes in a different direction.
I
after
think
the
if it
first
was, even though I was thinking it would be like a quirky, sorry, we're getting a little distracted. There is
there's a cat.
stray
that
cat
we
running
think
around?
might be
No,
just
I
hunting
think
mice.
no,
but
he's
probably
getting
not.
he's
I
getting
don't know.
it's getting spooked by the cars on the highway.
Or it's just eating crumbs from the baby shower that was here previously.
Yeah, right before we start recording this
Yeah.
baby shower. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the trailer is quirky. It looks like we mentioned Wes Anderson a few minutes ago, the director, who's done things like Rushmore, The Royal Tenenbaums, and Isle of Dogs, and The Darjeeling Unlimited, like a number of films, and he has a very set look and style. The
Yeah.
trailer, and even at times the film, makes it look like a Wes Anderson film with the colors, how they set their scenes, how they set everybody. You know, like people are standing in different depths and, you know, the way they stage and organize the
Right.
placement of actors. It felt, by the trailer and even when the movie started, like, ooh, is this somewhat of a Wes Anderson ripoff in style? And it's not at all.
No.
Which that was refreshing. But this might also explain its current Rotten Tomatoes ratings.
It has a pretty high rating, right?
Yeah, it's like, as of this recording, a 93% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes. User review, the people who see the film, it's in the 50s.
Okay. That makes sense.
So it's like critics love it, people hate it, but maybe, like you said, maybe part of the reason
It makes
is
sense. It doesn't, like, if you think you're going into one thing and you get a little bit of that, but it's not really what you're going into. You know?
I agree. And based on the trailer, for anybody who's unaware, it might be many of you, Limbo is the story of a handful of male refugees from various countries hanging out in limbo, if you will, in purgatory, in a small, remote island.
It's like a holding area
Yep.
for refugees, basically.
off
but
the
it's
coast of Scotland.
Scotland. So it's set in Scotland. I don't know if it's actually filmed in Scotland, but it's
It
supposed
looked
to
like
be.
it.
I mean, I've never been to Scotland.
No, but the stuff you see of Scotland among, like, northern
Right.
Scotland.
It seemed like it was. I researched. We haven't done any research,
Well,
really.
because we just saw it.
We just saw it. But it looked as if it was in Scotland. But it's like a holding area for refugees, except it's very isolated. There aren't. It's just about 4 of them, 5 of them.
Well, no, there's like 20
Oh,
total.
there's 20 altogether, and they're in these
The
kind of
film-
like spaced out housing.
The film focuses
areas.
on 4 of them.
Right. And we focus more on 4, but we see the other 20 in like a class.
It's like a cultural awareness,
cultural awareness
assimilation
class
type class to
that
learn
they take.
to learn Western customs. And so that's the
Right.
movie. And so it's the main character's name, Omar, who's Syrian. It mainly focuses on him, and he's just sort of not a silent protagonist, but he's a quiet protagonist, almost expressionless protagonist.
Yes.
And you're just seeing it all from his perspective.
It's funny, he's expressionless, however, and somewhat during most of the movie, emotionless, I guess. However, because of that dead emotion, you actually feel more emotion for him.
Well, it's clear he's bottling.
Right.
All
You
his
feel
turmoil.
the inside of his emotion, even though he's not showing the emotion because of his quiet, kind of suppressed
Yeah.
nature.
And everybody here, they're just sitting, they're waiting. They're waiting to see if they will be granted asylum into the country.
They're waiting for a letter to show up.
Yeah, and
In the mail.
One of 2 things is going to happen for people there. They're either going to get their letter of asylum and be accepted into the country, or they will be deported and picked
Right.
up and deported. Both things happen to people within this film.
And the reason why Omar has come is because he is from Syria. He's from Syria, and there is war that has
Yeah.
broken out in Syria, and his brother has chosen to go to war.
His brother stayed and fought.
His family is still there.
No, his family fled to Turkey.
But at first, they're still there, and then they flee to
Yeah.
Turkey. And then he has chosen to become a refugee and leave.
And Omar's gone to Scotland because he's also a musician.
He's a musician.
I almost said magician.
So he brings his, how do you say the instrument? Ode?
Ode. It's like,
It's like a guitar,
Mm-hmm.
similar to a guitar, but in a different shape. And he's in his previous life, I guess, in Syria, he was
it's kind of a big deal.
a big deal musician. He was
Well, his
popular.
grandfather was a real big deal.
Right.
He is kind of a big
He
deal.
was very popular and social and full of life, and you would say from his kind of flashbacks of
Yeah,
that
in his previous life.
previous life.
I used to be happy,
Yeah.
to quote the movie.
What did I say? I used to be happy, and now I have cried so many tears, I have no more tears left.
Yeah. So as we quote the movie, part of the group's cultural awareness assimilation class, they have to like do these like I used to statements. And maybe that's the
Which
first.
sounds so depressing when it comes out of my mouth, but in the movie, it's actually a funny part.
Okay, so let's talk about the funny parts. The first part of this film, which is what the trailer kind of presents. This takes a a very serious topic and a difficult situation for any person to be in, and it attempts to make it quirky,
Right.
especially the first half.
I mean, right out the door when the movie starts is probably the quirkiest part of the movie.
What's that?
When they're
Oh, yes.
the teachers, if you will,
Yeah. Well, let's put this. The individuals on the island, the Scottish individuals on the island, right? The 2 teachers that are teaching them Scottish ways, right? How to be Westerners.
how to assimilate.
Yeah. They come off as like out of touch and ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
And there's,
But
the
they're
silly sort of
quirky
dancing.
and funny.
It
They're
almost-
showing them how to
it's
dance
something
and how not to offend a woman when you're dancing with them, basically.
Well, it says, there's on the board, it says Cultural Awareness 101, sex, is a smile and invitation, ?
Is a smile and invitation.
And that's what they're teaching them is even if you're dancing with a woman and she seems happy that even though this is never talked about and explained, we know what the point they're trying to get at
You're
is.
still not supposed to touch
You
the
cannot
butt.
make advances.
You cannot make advances
And
on
in their
them.
recreation, they do that, and then
They act it out.
and then all the people like us as audience members, the various refugees are all just staring blankly at like, what have we just
Like, what
seen?
are they doing?
No, and I would say this, part of that quirkiness, all of the Scottish inhabitants of this island, there's not many, there's only a handful of people from Scotland,
Right.
Scottish individuals who live on this island. They're all presented as aloof, quirky, out of touch, judgmental, right? There's the young kids who like to do donuts
Oh, yeah.
in the field,
Yeah.
and they're just like, oh, I think he's a
Racist,
terrorist. Oh, I think he's a
judgmental.
rapist. I think are you not going to blow up buildings and rape people, are you?
Right. And he's kind of like just staring at them blankly, like, no, like that
Yeah.
it wasn't a
Well,
thought.
he's like, they're like, don't rape anybody, okay? And he's like, okay, I
wasn't
won't.
planning on it.
But all of that is quirky.
Mm-hmm.
It's presented, and everybody, a lot of the individuals, refugees, they all dress like they're out of like a quirky Wes Anderson or Napoleon Dynamite
The
type comedy.
refugees?
Well, the one his good friend, the one who's his sort of friend, his partner from Iraq.
Yeah. What's his name?
I was
in the movie?
in the film. I can look it up.
In the film. But the
Farad.
the
It's
other two
Farad.
men are from where? Does it ever say where they're from?
One is from Nigeria.
Nigeria.
They're from
That's
Nigeria.
what I thought. I think they're both from Nigeria.
Yeah, they are.
Because they came together.
So my point is, there's a lot of quirky jokes in there, right? And it's touchy territory. Because who are you making fun of, right? It's easy to make fun of the Scottish and it's easier to make fun of both, but it's easier to make fun of the Scottish individuals because through the eyes of the refugees.
Well, because
they're-
you're looking at it through the point of view of the refugees.
Well,
so,
primarily Omar.
I mean, yeah, so they do seem weird and quirky to
And
him.
absurd.
And absurd.
And out of touch.
So that's kind of what's portrayed in the movie is, I think, his point of view of these people that are trying to show him how to be Scottish. I don't know.
Yeah, and
Part of a world that he can't even see because
well,
he's
I think
in
part-
limbo.
yeah. Well, I think part of the message it seems I'm taking is the way those actions behave, right? That these refugees are dehumanized even amongst the people who are trying to help them.
Absolutely.
That they don't see them as intelligent, thinking individuals.
Talented.
This is how they look at and treat them. So that explains that. But then I'm saying it's tricky if you're making fun of the refugees,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think it ever really makes fun of them, but it's a fine line. Like, do you want to make Farad, the Iraqi friend? He's kind of a caricature in a lot of the film, right? He idolizes Freddie Mercury.
He semi-looks like Freddie Mercury.
Well, he says
An
we share
older
a
version.
mustache.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He dresses funny. He's a little quirky.
He befriends a chicken.
He has a pet chicken that he also calls Freddie Mercury Jr. He says kind of silly things sometimes.
But the refreshing thing about his character is that he is the positive light. I mean, he's just going. He keeps going every day. He doesn't, at one point he asks him, like, how do you do this? Like, we just sit here and we don't hear anything and we don't hear anything and we don't hear anything. And he says, well, I don't think about it. Like, he's trying to find comfort, right? Through the chicken, through the little routines he does or whatnot.
And that's also the weird counterbalance in part in the first half. There's these sprinkles of eccentric behavior and little jokes, right? Amongst what is a very, very quiet and slow plotting movie, right? Like, there's long scenes where the camera sits on the landscape of Scotland. And you hear conversations or you hear things in the background, or the camera might move a moment slowly and then slowly go back into place, right?
Because again, I think it's coming from Omar's perspective, where he's just like staring blankly into this vast land of nothing, his limbo.
Yeah.
Basically. So
Well, there's no opportunity because he's not even allowed to work. He can't work. He can't do anything. He has to stay until he gets his
sees
asylum.
some people that have decided to work, and the result that happens to them.
Well, they see deportation happen. They see these things, and he's really just, it's sit in this flat that you're sharing with a few other people, walk around the landscape,
aimlessly.
and occasionally
He calls his parents, like,
we don't know the time
I don't know
of
how
things, but he
often,
calls
but-
his parents occasionally.
and that really that's the most dialogue of the story, and it kind of like sets the character development for him as his conversations, his relationship with his brother and his relationship with his dad and his mom, and kind of really develops his character through the conversations with his family, with his mom, basically.
And that might be, like I said, I think some people might be going and expecting the quirky, like we did too. But then it removes that expectation quick.
It does. The quirkiness kind of goes away, really.
Well, it's sprinkled.
Yeah. What's
Like
his
that-
name? Farad?
Farad?
He remains quirky throughout.
Yes.
But
He's a little, like I said, if anything, he's a little like Napoleon Dynamite-esque.
I wouldn't
his
say
thing.
the movie is quirky, though. Like,
No.
after the first 20 minutes,
No, out of our
30
podcast,
minutes.
I'm going to say this right now. Out of our podcast we've done, this is the saddest movie we've seen.
Absolutely.
I think this movie was down like depressing and tragic at times.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, you're sitting there thinking, can you imagine this, this being your existence?
And that's what I feel about the movie. I feel so I think those long pauses where it's really slow, it's quiet. It's even like if you're not have a trained ear to even pick up on like thick Scottish accents, and not even the Scottish accents. Everyone speaks with an accent. So you have to kind of just really kind of tune in and listen.
Because the accents are thick.
For everybody.
And you have to, it's hard to understand at times.
And there's not long.
Which makes it really authentic, I felt like.
Yeah, and there's never long. No one has long speeches and conversations. It's
No.
more real
Just
conversations
like casual
of
conversation.
a couple words here and there, a long pause, a couple more words. So it does set the stage of, hey, this is Limbo. There's just a lot of waiting, and you're going to wait along with us as a viewer. But the movie does sort of meander. What's the word? Like
Meander.
meander? It
Yeah.
meanders. And you're kind of wondering, like, okay, where's this going? Because that's the other thing. That's the other quirky part. He carries his instrument with him everywhere he goes because it's like a prized possession. He can't leave it anywhere.
Well, it's his life. It was his life. And his,
Well, it's not even his life. It's his identity.
Yeah, it's everything to him. It's how he identifies himself. It's how he made money, maybe, in his
Well,
previous
it's also preserving his
existence.
family name and his
It's his
heritage
culture.
and his culture. And his father has beat into his head over time. A musician who isn't playing is dead,
Right.
and he's not playing.
Right.
One, he
He's
has a
not-
cast on his
he
arm.
never plays.
For the first half of the film, so he's not capable of playing.
Right.
But even when he gets the cast removed, he still can't bring himself to play his guitar or
Right.
his instrument.
Yeah.
And then I think that's where, to move it on. So I think the first half you're watching this, you're like, that's at least me. Like, I don't know about this. It's all right, but there's nothing special about it. I think the second half of the film starts to turn into, I don't want to say masterpiece, but
Wow, that's
exquisite filmmaking to the highest order. Exquisite filmmaking and acting, top notch.
Wow, you really feel great about this movie.
The second half, I think the second half of the movie becomes, at minimum, much more powerful than the first
agree.
half.
Usually I have more time to digest it. This time I don't, but as we talk about it, I feel like like the solitude and his point of view, and you think about his, I mean, there's one in particular point, we've said so much already. Just like in, I'm making a parallel now. You ready for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Parallel warning.
Just like in Minari.
Minari came to mind when I was watching this occasion.
Right?
Mainly when they was looking for, he wanted a certain spice.
That's what I'm about to say, yeah. So in Minari, where, spices and food are what make you feel most connected to home. Even as Americans, like when you're away from home, or, when you go home to your mom or whoever you go home to, that food or whatever you're used to eating growing up. And he is getting his mom's recipe for something and wanting to find the spices and whatnot to make the recipe. And he struggles or can't find, because the grocery store is not even
like
it's not even a grocery
it's
store.
It's just like a little thing that's
There's,
also
in
run.
the spices area, they have a box of bubbles. Like they don't even have spices.
No, and he asks him, "Do you have spices?" And he says, "I have ketchup and mustard."
Yeah, and so to me, the best part of that. Do we even say that part?
What? Sure.
Towards the end, he goes to the grocery store, and the guy who works the grocery store is of similar descent, I think.
I think he's from Pakistan.
And he
Syrian, yeah, Pakistan.
orders the spice he wants. And that's really kind of the most emotion, besides when he's sad and crying, of happiness that you see to that point in him. And I thought that was a great, I don't know. That was one of my favorite parts of the movie, really.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that they did that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. As the movie progresses into the second half, I was asking myself, what is this movie about? Like, what is the purpose other than showing a refugee, somebody sitting in limbo, waiting? Because it's really a movie about just sitting and waiting for your fate. And and when you start thinking about one's fate, and when your fate's like this, something, right? It's out of your control, your destiny, and you just kind of have to trust and have hope. And
at some point, he questions what am I even doing? Why did I even leave?
That's what I mean. When you start really seeing what
is this going to be even better than
what Omar is
I was
struggling
at?
with, right? Have I made the right decision? I left my family. My family's been split up. I'm gone from my country.
My family's struggling financially and struggling in other
My
ways.
brother is out defending our way of life, our whole being, all that. And as Omar struggles more and more with his situation, right? You realize that first half where everything kind of looks absurd and silly and quirky is just him making he's just a foreigner in a foreign land, right? He's trying to make sense of it all. And as he really starts to dial into his emotions and his frustrations and really seeing the reality of their situation, because there's this idea of they say little things throughout the film. You can be anything you want to be if you work hard enough. And there's an ongoing joke about one of the Nigerians. He wants to be a footballer.
Right.
And it's absurd. You'll never be a footballer, right? And Farhad wants to be a businessman and work in an office and have a suit, right? And you see people kind of chasing these dreams that really aren't the reality for them.
Right.
And as Omar starts to find the reality, what happens to this landscape that he's been looking at constantly, everything becomes frigid and cold and dangerous and dead. And you know, now physically, this landscape, which is a character itself, just becomes unwelcoming and harsh. Like the world, Omar's realized I've left from one harsh
environment and
to another.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't a land of promise or a way out. And that's when you also, like you said, you start seeing Omar's emotions and his anger, and you find that it's a movie about
coming to terms with
your situation and not willing to let go of your past, right? I think, what was that quote you told me this morning about comparison?
Comparison is the thief of joy.
And Omar can't let go of the life he had prior.
Right.
Because at one point he says, I just want everything to be back the way it was.
He's constantly comparing his life with his previous life, which
is gone.
Right.
Like, nothing he can do can bring it back because of the war happening in Syria. Like, that life is gone. His family will never be back together the way it is.
Right.
Him and his brother, which, will never be reunited in that way.
Have a strained relationship for multiple reasons.
And he has to come to terms with that. He won't even play his instrument because he says it doesn't sound the same anymore. Because nothing.
Because
and so,
he's comparing.
So unless he can come to grips with all that, he's doomed like everyone else that he sees kind of falling to the hands of fate, if you will. So when all that started clicking, and you see, and the movie changes, right, from being like very almost eccentric and quirky looking to being very, like, they do a lot more close-ups, like super close-ups. It's not these well articulated framing shots that look almost like well composed photographs.
Right.
They're like close-ups on people's faces. I think like Fahid, when he talks at one point, it like really opens up about his situation.
Really
it's like it's a close-up of his face. You can see like every hair in his mustache, and I'm like, oh, he has one gray hair in his mustache.
Yeah. So yeah, the way they shoot the scenes change with the emotion of or the acceptance.
The film becomes much more claustrophobic.
Right.
The second half, as well. Versus it seemed like wide open, like the world is your oyster and full of possibilities. The second half, I started to also feel very constricted and confined. Just like, and I think Omar felt his world was closing in on him.
In the chaos of when he helps those people searching for the dogs or the goats or whatever they're
the sheep or the
for.
goats get out. I think it's the sheep get out. Yeah.
It's kind of like this chaotic, harsh, lost, kind of lost in the landscape feeling.
Yeah.
Which is like the
climax.
Climax of the what am I doing here? This is a harsh environment. I'm not gonna survive this environment, you know.
And no one really seems to care if I do it or not.
Right. Nobody cares, and he finds an example of that.
Yeah, and so when the movie hits all those strides in the last 45 minutes or so, that's when I really liked it. And then you reflect back on the first half where it's like the kind of quirky outfits, even things like there's an ongoing little bit about Friends, the TV show Friends.
Right.
All throughout it.
Because they have one TV, and they have all the past episodes of Friends, and that's kind of what they watch, and they're trying to assimilate by kind of doing and saying.
Well, if you notice in the first half,
things of the characters
which
of
again,
Friends.
maybe this is just me trying to like come to terms with the first half because tonally they're two different movies. The first half tonally is about like getting there, and the second half is sort of the dark reality of it all. But maybe it forgives me. I'm forgiving it. Or maybe it's just a misstep in its intentions because you see it. Oh, they're consuming Western culture. They're consuming Friends TV show on burned DVDs. All they ever seem to be eating are things like cereal and candy bars.
Right.
So it's just maybe the first half is just a little bit more of, I don't even know how to describe it, but just more of the cliche Western staples. Like, oh, what does it mean to live in Western culture, right? You watch
Right.
Friends and you eat
Easier.
junk food. And if it was that kind of quirky movie, A Stranger in a Strange Land, like Fish Out of Water movie, which is what the trailer presents it, I think it would have
But
been
it's not
fine.
that
I think it
at
would have been
all.
fine, but a forgettable film.
It's definitely deeper than that. for sure.
Instead, it sheds that skin about 45 minutes in. And it's almost like the director, Ben Sharrock, says, oh, I really want to make a movie about, the struggle of just being in this situation. There's
Right.
none of that, the tough trials of being a refugee and escaping your country,
No.
which is good. It's really just like, what does it mean to be in limbo? And
And how does that feel? And what are the emotions that are attached to that? And
yeah.
all of the things that go along with that.
And my last little thing I was thinking a lot like Limbo's like purgatory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was even thinking of like Dante's Circles of Hell, right? Because purgatory's on like the outer rim of those layers
Right.
of that. But as you get closer to through the circles, Dante's Inferno, as you get further into the circles of hell, it gets colder, right? It's super cold. And that's as Omar gets further and further in his limbo, in his situation, what happens? It gets colder and colder and colder and colder.
Right.
And like in essence, like Omar realized, like, I'm kind of stuck in torment and hell, physically in this location, but then also mentally and emotionally. So
Yeah, mentally and emotionally, you really see him transition from the beginning to the middle to the end. Like you can
and then the big question
really
is,
feel his transition.
can Omar get out of it?
What happens?
Can Omar come through the other side?
What happens? Who knows?
Or even any of the other refugees? And that's the bigger question of how do you deal with changes in life? How do you deal with hope when there doesn't seem to be hope? How do you let go of the past and comparison and move forward in your life? And where does one's own identity and culture and traditions fall in that as well?
Right. Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's for those reasons that I thought the second half was very powerful.
You loved it.
I
liked it a
I
lot.
really liked the movie. I don't know if it's a tough thing. I don't know how much I would ever watch it again.
Right.
But that second half, I don't know. I feel there's a better way to do the first half. Is my only complaint on it.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it a lot.
I would
didn't-
keep it slow and quiet, no question.
I didn't mind the slow and quietness of it. I would say if you have teenage boys, take them, but don't expect them to like it. But don't not take them.
No, it's not that
because
to bring back to it.
I think it's a good. It's good for them to see films. I was slightly worried at the beginning because that's what I do. I worry. But then I was like, you know what? They need to see films like this.
Well, it's young people. It's other adults. It's so often we're trained. You mentioned in a previous episode, we're so trained. Like I think Stowaway, we're so trained to think one way about film.
Right.
And this is truly a film just trying to present the refugee story a bit differently.
But you can't expect teenage boys to get what we got out of it.
No, but you got to give people a chance to sit with it. Like I bring up with my teenage son when I made him watch the A24 film First Cow with me.
Right.
And that's a very slow plotting movie, which even in full disclosure, I fell asleep the first time I watched it. And I woke up as it was ending, and he was like, oh, I really like that movie. And I was like, wow, I thought it was like super dull and slow. But it was like the next day he was talking about, oh, I like that. That was really good. And he sat with it and thought about it. And then I went back and rewatched it and realized First Cow is like an amazing movie as well. But I think if we don't expose people, either ourselves or especially those with very one-track minded views of film, you got to expose people, and it doesn't necessarily sit with them day one. And heck, it might not even be like day 24. It might be day 672.
Well, that's what I mean. I think eventually they look back on it and feel like, oh, like, I went and saw this film when I was a teenager, and now I kind of like appreciate what
Right.
it was.
Yeah, and I think with anybody, that's the point. Like, I think it's rare to really have a really good film. Now, and again, there's difference, right? Entertainment versus like art and trying to actually say and communicate something.
Right.
Entertainment, if it's purely entertainment, popcorn fodder, then the second that movie ends, you should have that emotion like, oh, that was really good or that was really bad.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
King Kong versus Godzilla, that's really good, that's really bad, right?
Right.
You should have that instant emotion. Films that are really good and really well made, I'd be suspicious of the second like it's over of, oh, I really liked it, I really didn't like it. Because it's like, no, you got to sit with it a bit.
Definitely.
Was I being manipulated by the filmmaker? Or was I, or how many layers to that? And I think this had a good many layers once you got past that initial first layer of this film.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely was a different film than you thought you were going
But
into.
kudos to the whatever production house cut that trailer.
I know, because it gets people in there.
Yeah.
Because if it showed the trailer for what it really was, I think people would end up liking it that went to see it, but it wouldn't get as many people in the door.
But I think that explains why it's bombing at user reviews on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
They feel duped. But I
Well,
think
I
this
didn't
was
feel duped. It was unexpected.
this was
but I didn't feel duped.
a pleasant duped for me.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasant Mother's Day movie, I felt. I mean, it was
Well, it's not a pleasant. It's super sad, I feel.
I mean, it was super depressing, but I love depressing movies. You know that.
Mm-hmm. But it's also not a tearjerker. That's
And
what's crazy about it. There's at no point I feel that you're going to...
Never did I cry, and I'm a crier.
Yeah, you're not
but
going to get teary-eyed
Never
in this
did
film.
I cry, but I felt for the characters.
But you're going to sit there and be like, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's heartbreaking moments in it. Nothing that's...
It's heartbreaking, but it's not a crier.
No. It's not a crier at all.
No.
All right. This is good.
This
Our beers
was
are empty.
good. Yeah, they
Sunday
are.
night's coming to a close. Let's do our cheers to end this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? We cheers at the end.
Our empty cheers.
Yeah. That just means another
Cheers.
successful
I
podcast.
really enjoyed my day with you.
I enjoyed it with you.
Thank you. It was
Thanks.
a nice Mother's Day.
And yeah.
Yeah, we had
Hope
fun.
you enjoyed it. It was a fun movie. If you're still with us, as always, follow us on Instagram. Greatest. Nope. That's my other movie podcast.
That's not it.
It is.
It's called
What is it?
Night Before Movie. Is it that?
It's Night Before
Night
Podcast.
Before Movie Podcast.
Well, no. On Instagram, it's just Night Before
Sorry.
Podcast.
Night Before Podcast.
Find us there because we
Officially.
do let people know what the film is prior to the episode recording.
Prior to what? Yeah, prior to listening to
And
the
if you're looking for
episode.
Limbo, I think currently Limbo is only available in theaters. It's having a limited run, but I'm sure it will pop up on video on demand rental services
some
soon.
point.
Pretty darn soon. But okay.
All right.
So thanks for chatting with me about movies.
That was fun.
We'll talk again in a couple days.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.